Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is video number 6 in this intro to the React 2021 course. And this one we're going to be focusing on forms and how to do controlled and uncontrolled forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out this Pokemon component from the previous video out of app, and I'm going to get rid of all these imports to clean this up a little bit. And what I'm going to do is create a new component. So first we'll do new file, and we're going to do uncontrolled to-do list. Okay, .js. I'll copy the here. So basically there's two ways of doing forms in React. There's controlled forms and then there's uncontrolled forms. I would say most of the time you're going to be writing controlled forms, but it's easy. But I would say uncontrolled forms are easier to understand up front, and then that'll make it easier to understand what we're doing with the controlled form. So first we'll do a to-do list using an uncontrolled form, and then we'll do a to-do list with a controlled form. Okay, so uncontrolled to-do list. So there's our component. Okay, and then we will import that into app.js. Uncontrolled to-do list. So I bring that into the app.js, and then we'll just use our component. Uncontrolled to-do list. There we go. Let me start the server. Okay. Cool. Uncontrolled to-do list. So back to our uncontrolled to-do list component. Theoretically, what I would want is I want an array of to-dos. And again, anytime that array changes, what I see on the to-do list should update. So that makes very sense that it would be state, that array. So let's just start off by creating that state. Import use state from React. Okay, and then I will declare some state. So we'll say const to-dos set to-dos equals use state. And then we're going to initialize that array with a couple of to-dos. So let's just say eat breakfast. So each to-do will be a string for now. Okay. And then what I want to do is display those to-dos. So what I would do is I would map over those to-dos. So what I'll do is I'll create a UL, and in that UL we'll map and create LIs. So I'll do to-dos.map. So for each to-do, what I'd want to do is create an LI with the to-do. But again, we're going to want a key, so I'm going to grab the index and pass that as the key. Key equals index. Okay, and there we go. I have at least my to-do list displaying. I'm mapping over to-dos and creating the LI. So then what I would want to happen is I want there to be an input. And input, and this input will be of type equals text. And that's it. Well, that's got to be, again, you can't have you have to self-close everything. And then we'll have a button for submitting a to-do, new to-do. Okay, so there is my form. Now, an uncontrolled form meaning I don't have any state that's controlling what the form says. The form is completely just a normal form input that I can type into. So in that case, the way we're going to use the form is that we're going to grab the form's value in the same way you would grab a DOM node. So if you use jQuery or plain vanilla DOM, you would just like save the input into a variable and then access its value attribute or property. And there you'd find the value of what's typed in the input box. We're going to do the same thing, and the way you do that is using a hook called useRef. Okay, and what this does, it allows you to create a ref variable, which is like basically you capturing the DOM node, and then we can just grab the value of the input from there. So I can do this. I can sit there and say const input ref, you can call the variable whatever you want, equals use ref, and then we'll initialize it as null. Because where we assign the value of the ref is actually in our JSX. I would say here ref equals input ref. And what that does, it stores that DOM node in that ref. Just to show you what I mean, let's console.log. Okay, and we'll say ref, and then we will console log input ref. So you can see exactly what the input ref is. So if I open this up, notice, see, it's an object. Inside that object, there's a current property, and that current property is the input. And now I can access the input's properties. So pretty straightforward. Okay, it just gives me a variable in which I can access that input. So then I'm going to create a function that, what it does, it just uses that variable to access the value and pushes it into the array. So I'll say const, add to do equals, and all I'm going to do is just say, I'm going to create a new array, because here's the thing about state. See, this array is the state is currently an array. I don't want to just push something into that array and then update the state, because technically I'm passing in the same array. So far as React knows, it's the same thing. The array may have an extra element inside of it, but it's the same array. It's like a house. If I add a couch to my house, there's more things in my house, but it's still the same house. And React does not render if it's passed the same thing as the new state. So when it comes to array, it's evaluating whether it's the same array, not whether the array has the same contents. Okay, so in that case, I need to create a new array. So I want to create a copy of the original array. So what I'll do is I'll say const new state. That's usually what I'll call it. I'll use square brackets and I'll do ... the original set of to-dos. That's called the spread operator. And what I'm doing is I'm expanding that original array. I do have videos on the spread operator. I'll refer you to those. But all I'm doing, this is essentially what I'm doing, is I'm making a copy of the original, but it's a unique array. So when I update the state later, it'll treat it as a new array and update the DOM. Now I will push the value, so push the value into that array. So const, I don't need to push there. I would then do new state, because that's the new array, dot push, and then push input ref, because that's the ref, dot current, that's going to be pointing to the input, as we saw earlier in the console log, and then I'm going to grab its value property. That's going to push whatever is typed into the form into the array, and then I'm going to update the state. So I'm going to say set to-dos, and then set to-dos to the new state, which is a new array causing a render. So that is the function, and now I need to attach that function to this button. So I'll just say on click. Whenever we click this button, all you got to do is run add to do. And that's it. That's all it takes for me to make a to-do list using a controlled form. So for very simple cases where there's like one input, this is a pretty easy way of doing it. So I can just type in like eat lunch. So that's the value of the input. And there it goes. Eat lunch. The value of the input changes. Okay. Cool. Refresh. Well, if I go eat breakfast, let me just see what I did for the key when I did this thing here. Oh, I put key string of index. I want to put the variable index. That's why I was complaining. Eat lunch. And I can just keep doing it this way. And that works fine. But notice I don't empty out the form, so I would probably want to like clear the form. So then I would just take the additional step of saying, input ref dot current dot value, and then just return it back to an empty string, so that way the form empties out again. So that if I click this, now the form empties out. But that's it. That's all it takes. All that's happening is I'm pushing the button, that's triggering the function. The function is making a copy of the current state, pushing whatever is typed into the input box into this new array, and then setting that new array as the new state for the next render of the component. And so on the next render, the to-do list looks longer because the array has more items in it. And that's it. It just keeps doing that. So that's what's called an uncontrolled form. You grab the value of the inputs using refs. That becomes a little unwieldy once you have lots of inputs. So usually the preferred method of handling a form is what's called a controlled form. So let's make a copy of this. Copy. Paste. I'm going to rename the copy. Just make sure which one's the copy. Okay, this is the copy. And we're going to call this a controlled to-do list. So we're going to do the same app, same thing, except we're going to make it as a controlled form. Okay? So I'm just going to edit what we have here, except now we're going to call it a controlled form. Okay, so let me just change everywhere that needs to be changed. Controlled to-do list. And then let's change what we're importing in app. So I'm going to get rid of this and get rid of this. And I'm going to import the controlled to-do list. And then I'm going to use the controlled to-do list. Okay. Goody. And then we see that on the board. But again, it's just the old version currently. Now, the way this version is going to work is that we, instead of like, we'll still have our to-do state because that still needs to track the to-dos. But now the form is going to have its own state. So that's why it's controlled, because the state controls the form. So now, and I'm going to get rid of this whole ref thing. So I was thinking, I'm not going to use the ref anymore. And so let me just actually kind of clear all of this out. We're not going to use the add to do function anymore. We don't need this reference to a ref anymore and add to do. So I'm just going to get rid of all these pieces. Okay, cool. And then now what I'm going to want to do is wrap my form in a form tag. So ideally here you're going to want everything inside a form tag for this. Okay. Cool. And then I'm going to change this button to a submit input because it'll just make more sense. Type equals submit, and then the value of this input will equal, you know, new to do. Okay, so we still have the same sort of setup. And again, this is, oh, am I editing the wrong form? I am. Oops. Dot current dot value equals there. Okay, so let me go back and make all these changes to the right form. Let me just close all these files. Okay. So controlled to-do list. So again, I'm not going to need the use ref anymore. I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. We don't need this anymore. And we don't need this anymore. And again, I'm going to refactor this input here to be a submit. So input type equals submit. And again, the text on the button, the value equals new to do. And then I'm going to wrap this in a form tag. Okay. So essentially, we're kind of in the same place. But what I need to do is now give the form its own state for tracking the form. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const form set form. And then what you want to do, use state, is that the state in this case should be an object, and this should have a property for each input. I only have one input, so I only need one property. So we'll call this property the to-do. Okay, or yeah, we'll call it the to-do. And the to-do right now equals nothing. It's just an empty string. So that's my initial state. And okay, the to-do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind the value of the input box to that property. So I'm going to say this input box is bound to form.the-to-do. Because again, form is that object with the property of the to-do. But the problem is now what's in this input box is controlled by that state. So right now I cannot type in the box because even though I'm typing in characters, and it recognizes that I'm typing stuff in, but every time I type stuff in, it's automatically setting it back to the thing that it's bound to. So it's bound to this the to-do property, which is an empty string. So it keeps changing it back to an empty string before I can see anything. Okay. So what I need to do, so see it's giving you a warning because I don't have some sort of way to handle this. What I want to do is that every time I type in the input box in React, they have a custom change event, and that happens with each keystroke. What I want to do is update the state every time I type into the box, so that way the state is updated, which then updates the form. Okay, so it's not my typing that's changing the form. My typing is changing the state, and the state changes the form. That's why it's called a controlled form, because the state is controlling the form. Okay, and the way we do this is we generally create a handle change function. Const handle change, and this function will run on every change. Now you could write it per property, but generally the best way to do it is write it in a way that's sort of always usable. So there's a couple pieces we need. The input is going to have a name property, and that name prop needs to match whatever property it's bound to in the state. So in this case, the to do. So the name should be the to do. Okay, name should equal the to do. Okay, these gotta equal, or else this is not going to work. So handle change equals, and we're going to reuse, since this function is going to run whenever an event occurs, whenever an onChange event occurs, just like any event in the DOM, it receives an event object. So I'm declaring the event object so I can receive the event object. Because one of the properties in the event is event.target, which allows me to target the input that I'm typing in. So I can use the same function for many inputs, which is the beauty of writing this function this way. I can use the same, if I have 20 inputs, one function is needed. You'll see some people that they'll write a function for each input. That can get really, really tedious. This is how you write a function that works for all the inputs, except for the occasional odd input, like that might be like a select form or something unique, like a checkbox that you might need to write a custom handle change for. But essentially, it's going to be very much like what we did in the uncontrolled form, where we need to make a copy of the existing state. So I'm going to make a copy of the existing state, because objects are like arrays, because arrays are objects. That, again, it doesn't matter what the contents are of the object or array. It matters whether the array is a different or object is a new object. Okay? So again, it's not evaluating the contents, it's evaluating the instance. This is what's referred to as reference versus value. So I have a video on that too, so go check that out if you want to get more deeper into that concept of reference versus value. Okay, but copy of the existing state. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to say const new state, just kind of like we did before, except this case the form state is an object, so I'm going to do ... form. That makes a copy of the existing state. Then I'm going to update the new state. So I'm going to update the new object, not the old object. So I'm going to say new state, but I don't know which property I'm going to update. So I'm going to rely on the name property of the input I'm typing in. So I say event.target, which represents the input I'm typing in, and I want to access its name property. Right now there's only one, so in that case the name property is going to be the to do, which then lets me update the to do property in the state. And then I'm going to say that's going to equal the value of the input, what I just typed. And then I update the state. So then I say set form to the new state. So now what that's doing is that I'm going to take this function and attach it to this input's onChange event. So I'm going to say onChange equals handle change. Okay, and now I can type in the input box again. Because what's happening is every time I type in the input box, it's triggering that handle change function. That handle change function is updating the state, and then that state is updating the form. Because again, because I did this, the value equals the state is what's controlling what's showing up on the form on the screen. Now, if this seems convoluted, it kind of is. This is one of the areas of React I'm not a huge fan of. React made the decision of unidirectional data. So data only moves in one direction. There's no two-way data binding. So if you've used Vue or Angular, you might have noticed that doing a form is way easier. You just use like this model directive, and that just says this variable equals this input. This variable equals that input. And it's just easy. Same thing as Svelte. You have the model directive. Because they all use two-way data binding. React, and the creators of React, aka Facebook, made the decision that it'd be better if data only flowed in one direction, one for reasons of optimization, 2 because it's easier to find bugs if you know the data is only moving one way. But it does make things like forms a bit more difficult because you have to sort of manufacture this mechanism of updating the state and the input. But there are lots and lots of libraries and custom hooks out there that help you do this. I will get there. But first you got to know how to do it the hard way before you can appreciate doing it the easy way. Okay, so again, right now I'm updating the form, which is updating the state. So again, if I go to the control to-do list, I can see that every time I type, this state here is updating. See, it's updating. Yay. Okay, so again, now every time I type in the input, it's updating the state, which updates the input, the visual of the input. Good. So that means whatever the state will always match what's inside the input. So I don't necessarily need to use a ref to get the data anymore. I can just use the state. So now I just need something to happen when the form is submitted. So I'm going to create a handle submit function, const handle submit. And again, we're going to pass it the event because again, forms by default, this is an HTML thing. When they're submitted, they have a tendency of refreshing the page. We want to prevent that, so we have to do event.prevent default. That prevents the page from refreshing. Try doing it without it. You'll notice the page refreshes. Then I can just do whatever I want to happen. I can just do whatever I want. In this case, what I want to happen is I want to push the new to-do. I'm going to update the to-do state. So I'm going to do exactly what I did before. So I'm going to make a copy of the to-do state. So we're doing exactly what we did before. So const new state equals an array that copies the to-dos. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push new to do. So the new to do is in the state, in that form state. So I'm just going to say new state dot push, and that's form dot the to do. So I push that into the array, and then I update the to do state. Okay, so I'm going to say new set to dos. Okay, set to-dos to the new state. But at the same time, I want to clear out the form. So I want to say set form. And I'm going to set that to an object with the to-do property. And I set that back to an empty string, just so that we were set back to our original state. And that clears the form. And then what I want is to attach that handle submit function to the onSubmit event on the form tag. So we're going to say every time the form is submitted, this handle submit function runs. Okay. Let me refresh. Okay, so now let's try this out. Eat lunch. And it works. Again, a little bit more code than before. But essentially what's happening is when I type in the box, I'm updating the state. And then when I hit submit, I just pull the data from the state and add it to the list of to-dos. So I can go boop, boop, and then I update the form state to blank out the form. And that's all that's happening. So again, I'm going to clear out the form here. So just put all the comments here. Cool. So that's how you do what's called a controlled form. And I'm going to just make a copy of this because we're going to, so I'll just do a paste. So that way there's just a copy with the old code. So the copy version will have the old code. But I'm going to show you how you could use this custom hook. I have a use form hook, so let me go find it. That would make this, that will shorten this up. So again, what's going to happen here is that we just have to pass in the object to go with the form. So again, if I were to use this use form hook, so I would just say import use form. And again, this is from my library, Merced React Hooks. Merced React Hooks. Okay, and again, it's an open source library, so if you see anything you want to improve upon in this library, feel free to make pull requests. I'll take a look at them. Use form. Okay, and basically what I'm going to do, and again, I'm looking at the documentation because I wrote this particular hook probably like 6 months ago. But essentially, instead of doing this, like this here, right here, I'm going to cut this object out because I'm going to need that. Control X. What we would do is I would say const form, so that's going to be the form state. Then I get the handle change function, so I don't need the handle change function anymore because it'll give me one to use. So I don't have to write that every time. And then I get a reset form function. But you can always write your own custom handle changes, but at least you'll have like sort of the default one that should work for most inputs. And then I say use form, and I pass it the initial state of the form, which is going to be that object from before. And cool. And now instead of using set form here, I could just do reset form, which will just clear out the form. Okay, now I'm still in the same place, but I didn't have to write that handle change function. Otherwise, everything else is the same. Handle change still works. Everything should work pretty much the same. Let me just see here. Can't resolve Merced React hooks, but I fixed the typing, so let me refresh. Oh, I gotta just restart the server. Sometimes it stops when you get the library name wrong. Compile. Use form is not exported from Merced React hooks. Is that the case? Oh, it's use form state. Okay, so use form state. Okay, so I gotta fix the documentation, but it should be use form state. Let's see if that fixes it. There we go. And then if I type in cheese, then it works. Okay, so that just saves you the trouble of having to think about how to reset the form. Really what it does, it makes the handle change function for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you just go attach it to the form, and again, you can just make your own handle submit function, because that's going to be different every time you use it, so I can't automate that. But again, you don't have to think about the handle change function. It gives you that. It gives you a function to reset the form, and you get the original form state that you can then just bind to the input. So that's a hook that's there to just make using the form a little bit easier. But there's other popular libraries for doing the same thing. Like the most popular one that I'm aware of is Formic. So Formic is another library that allows you to basically, it also helps you with like things like validations and whatnot. Because what a lot of people do is will store custom validation logic in their handle change functions. So this is just a pure quick dry handle change. If you wanted your own custom handle change, then you probably wouldn't have a need for this hook. But Formic might still be useful in automating some of the trickier parts of setting up a controlled form. Okay, again, that's one of the cool things about React. It has this huge world of libraries that you can use and tools that you have. But my name is Alex Merced. That's this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.